Today I wasn't really sure what I was going to talk about until I kind of started thinking about some of the trucking stuff. And I haven't talked about this a whole lot because it's, it's for me it's a vocation, not necessarily an avocation. So avocation is other stuff that I'm far more interested in. But I do forget that sometimes to others the stuff that I do for money personally can be interesting, and I've done a lot of things. And one of the things that I do own is a small trucking company, and it is a interesting industry. And today I'm going to talk about that industry specifically. Now I realize that this is probably a boring topic, so for everybody else you can scroll past this or what have you and just ignore me. But for those of you that are kind of interested or want to understand what's going on in the freight industry, I'm going to give you a perspective that is very much not only on the ground, but it's also from an owner-operator perspective. So a lot of what you're seeing out there in the freight world, for those who don't know or don't follow this stuff, is freight rates have been flat for a very long time. And truck drivers are no different than anybody else, right? They're seeing inflation, and they see it on the wholesale side because they see their fuel prices going up. They see the cost of maintenance going up. They see all these things happening in real time, and there's not a lot they can do about it because they're squeezed in the middle, just like a lot of businesses. They're right in the middle of all this. So in the industry, fuel prices dictate a lot of things to you, and if you're an owner operator, okay, actually, let me clarify this real quick. There's a couple of different kinds of owner operators that we need to talk about. The first is what's called a lease owner operator. Now, these are guys that are usually, not always, keep in mind, this isn't 100% bullseye, but in my experience, these are guys that are usually being taken advantage of by a large company. I'm not going to say any of the names of the large companies. You know who they are. You see their trucks every day up and down the street. Their names are all over their trailers, usually in giant characters, so you can see who these guys are. What happens is that they get guys into their training classes because in a lot of cases these are companies that'll hire brand new people who don't have CDLs. They put them through their school, which is usually between $2,500 and maybe $5,000 now. Now it's quite expensive, I'm sure. And what they do is they'll put the guys out there with a trainer. And the trainer is a guy who usually leases a truck. And so he's got a nut to crack every single week of, $500 to $800 depending on the truck. But he has to pay every single week. Now that's not including his insurance, that's not including his fuel, that's not including any of the expenses. That's just having the truck. So he has to spend a lot of money to maintain that truck. And usually it's a used truck that the company sold him. So the truck already has maybe 300,000 or 400,000 miles on it or more. And then they sell him to the driver, who's now a lease driver. Now he's got this giant maintenance that he has to keep up with all the maintenance now because now all the maintenance is coming due. After about the half-life at about 500,000 miles, a lot of maintenance starts coming due. And well, so that guy now gets this ridiculous lease payment. And you can say, like, well, but it's lease to own. Yeah, but the lease rate factor is, in a lot of these cases are upwards of 29, 30%. I mean, it's a lot. These companies are taking advantage of guys who don't understand how it works. And I'll explain just briefly how they end up taking advantage of them. You get a guy who comes out of your school, you go up with a trainer, and the trainer a lot of times is a lease driver, and he's making more money. He gets money per mile. So he gets, let's say, $1 a mile. But the trainer's paying you, say, 35-40 cents a mile, so he's making the spread. So for him, it's a good deal. Now, as long as you don't wreck his truck, it's a good deal for him, or her. It doesn't make a difference anyway. So, and then they make a little more money. But that's how they sell it a lot. A lot of these companies, these big companies in particular, they'll sell that to new people about, hey, be a lease driver, and it's a good deal for you. You'll make twice the money. What they don't tell you is you also have twice the expenses that go along with all of that, and you're still under the gun. There's a reason why it's a weekly lease, not a monthly lease. It's a weekly lease, and they do that because they want to keep you on the road. They want to keep you you always owing. You're always having to remember how this game works. As with all these large companies, it's all about keeping you on the road, keeping you busy, keeping you making them make money, making money for them, because that's how it works. So guys, it's like in my case, guys like me who own his equipment, outright, I don't owe anybody anything. So, when you have a lot more freedom. You have a lot more freedom to pick and choose your loads and pick and choose what you're willing to sell yourself for, because you're going to have a lot of loads that aren't worth taking, largely because maybe the risk isn't worth, the type of product you're hauling isn't worth the amount of money they're offering, and you're like, nah, let the illegals take that, and they will, which is I'll get into that a little bit later on, but that's another problem as well, is that you're competing with all of this. So in the industry, you've got these guys who are kind of trapped, right, with their leases. And the other ones, of course, are the guys who don't have any of this stuff, right? And they're owner-operators, and but they have their bills to pay too. And they're also seeing all of the costs go through the roof. It's causing a lot of issues because the mega carriers, right, they can't afford to put people in these trucks anymore. And I don't give a shit. Look, I know you guys, you Star Trek people and you Star Wars people out there, God love you guys, but man, they're not going to automate this shit. You're just not going to do that. They know, and I did a video on this a long time ago where I debunked all of this and I pointed all this stuff out to anybody who was paying attention. They know that the average person, these companies that say, oh, we're going to automate all these trucks and we're going to have robots driving trucks, they know that most people, the vast majority of all Americans, have never driven a semi-truck. They've never had to deal with weather conditions. They've never had to deal with road conditions. They've never had to deal with any of this stuff. They've never had to deal with what it feels like to pull, to have 60,000 pounds behind you in a 20,000 pound truck. Okay? They've never had to deal. They know that most people don't operate like that. They can't think like that. They don't know what any of that stuff feels like. They know, just like I pointed out, most people know. Most of these people who pass all this shit off about flying cars and all that other bull, they know that most people have never flown a plane. I'm saying this as a pilot. They know most people have never flown planes. They don't know what it feels like to do any of this stuff. There's a feel that goes with it. It's not just the theory. You can read about flight theory, but until you go do it, it's not the same thing. Same thing with semi-trucks. So they know most people, so they take advantage of your ignorance. So because you don't know any of this stuff, you just assume that, oh, no, they're going to automate this, or they're going to do, they're not going to do any of that shit. It's fake. It's fake. Automation is open the borders, flood the country with a bunch of fucking illegals, and have them drive these trucks for basically slave wages. Automation is just a fancy word for slave. Because as with most people, they're not actually solving a problem. Most businesses, I don't know if this comes as a surprise to you, but I talked about this with the middleman economy. Okay, the false hope economy, the middleman economy, which is really birthed out of that. The middleman economy is people moving problems. They're not solving the problem, they're moving the problem to someone else. Think of how corporate America operates nowadays. How does corporate America operate? The goal, when a problem comes in, your goal is to get that problem off your desk as quickly as possible to make it somebody else's problem. And that's what happens. And sooner or later, it filters its way down to somebody on the bottom of the stack that can actually maybe solve the problem, assuming that they want to, assuming that they have any real motivation to do it. That's rapidly eroding because your currency's worthless. Currency dog shit. So that's how this kind of thing is working. And you're seeing this happen in freight. And more of these problems are just going to keep creeping. This is why and of course it's keeping the freight rates artificially lower than they really should be, strictly speaking. This is actually a major problem because then you get fewer and fewer people who are willing to actually go and take that risk and do that job. So in the short time that I have, I hope some of that made sense to you guys. So if you have questions, you can feel free to ask questions. I'll be happy to answer them as best I can anyway. But there you go. I'll do a free form after this.